Chapter 1. Roots in the Soil. The monsoons had come late that year. I remember watching my father's calloused hands dig desperately into the parched earth, his fingernails black with soil, as he searched for any sign of the rice seedlings that should have sprouted by now. The drought had stretched 3 months, and our family's small plot of land, barely half an acre, lay cracked and barren under the relentless Bihar sun. At 10 years old, I already understood what this meant. Another season without crops meant another year of debt to the local moneylender, another year of my mother skipping meals so my younger siblings could eat, another year of watching my father's shoulders bend a little more under the weight of our poverty. Our village, nestled in the floodplains of the Kosi River, had a cruel rhythm to it. The river would either drown our crops with unexpected floods or abandon us to wither in drought. There were no irrigation systems, no government aid that ever reached us, just the backbreaking cycle of hoping the land would provide. I woke each morning before dawn to the sound of my father coughing, that deep, wet cough that had clung to him since the last floods. By the time the sun painted the sky pink, I'd already collected firewood from the dwindling grove near our hut and drawn water from the communal well 3 kilometers away. My arms ached from carrying the heavy pots, but I never complained. Complaining was a luxury we couldn't afford. School was supposed to be my escape. The government primary school, a crumbling single-room structure with a perpetually leaking roof, at least offered the promise of something beyond the fields. But even there, poverty followed me like a shadow. While other children had proper uniforms, I wore my father's old shirt tied at the waist with jute string. My notebook was a collection of scrap paper salvaged from the tea stall where I worked evenings. It was at that tea stall where I first encountered the power of English. Mr. D'Souza, the owner, kept an old transistor radio that crackled with BBC broadcasts every evening. The smooth, confident voices speaking this foreign language fascinated me. Unlike our local Bhojpuri dialect, which felt tied to the earth and our struggles, English sounded like possibility itself. "Can you teach me?" I asked Mr. D'Souza one evening as I wiped down the sticky wooden tables. He laughed, his pond-stained teeth flashing in the dim light. "Why would a farmer's son need English? Focus on your math. That at least might help you calculate your crop yields." But I couldn't let it go. There was something about the way English moved, how it seemed to open doors just by being spoken. I began lingering near the radio, trying to catch phrases, repeating them silently to myself as I walked home through the dark. Chapter 2. The First Steps. My self-education began with a stolen newspaper. I found it blowing across the market square one afternoon, a week-old copy of the Hindu that some traveling official must have discarded. The ink had smeared in the rain, but I could still make out some headlines. That night, by the flickering light of a stolen candle, a luxury my mother would have scolded me for wasting, I pored over the strange words. Parliament, economy, international, they might as well have been written in another alphabet. I didn't know then that I was holding the newspaper upside down. The next market day, I traded a day's wages to a scrap dealer for a water-damaged English primer meant for primary students. Half its pages were missing, and the ones that remained were stuck together with mildew, but it became my most treasured possession. I hid it under the straw where I slept, terrified my father would find it and sell it for a few rupees. My first breakthrough came from an unlikely source, the village drunkard, Ram Bharose. He'd once been a schoolteacher before losing his family to cholera and taking to the bottle. Most days he lay in a stupor near the temple, but on rare sober mornings he'd recite English poetry to no one in particular. I began bringing him cups of tea in exchange for lessons. He taught me the alphabet first, his trembling hands tracing letters in the dirt. A is for apple, he'd say, though neither of us had ever seen one. B is for... He'd trail off, forgetting the next word, and I'd wait patiently until his memory returned. The village children mocked me mercilessly. "Angrezi Babu," they'd call, mimicking my clumsy attempts at pronunciation. Even my own brothers thought I'd gone mad. "What use is English when we can't even afford proper shoes?" they'd ask. But I persisted. While others slept, I whispered phrases to the buffaloes I was supposed to be watching. "Good morning. How are you? My name is..." The animals stared blankly, but their indifference was better than the laughter of humans. Chapter 3. A Glimpse of Another World. The turning point came during the annual Chhath Puja festival, when a group of foreign tourists arrived to photograph our rituals. Among them was a British anthropology student named Emma, who spoke halting Hindi. When she addressed me directly in English, "What is this ceremony for?" my mind went utterly blank. All those months of practice evaporated. I stood gaping like a fish, my mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Finally, I managed to blurt out, "For sun god, for good crops." The words came out horribly mangled, but Emma smiled encouragingly. That night, as fireworks lit up the river, I made a silent promise to myself. Next time someone spoke to me in English, I wouldn't freeze. I would answer properly, confidently. I began haunting the bus station where English-language newspapers sometimes got left behind. I memorized entire articles, not understanding half the words but relishing their rhythm. When the local landlord threw out an old battery-powered radio, I fished it from the trash and spent weeks nursing it back to life. The BBC World Service became my nightly companion, though the static often drowned out more than half the words. Chapter 4. The Price of Ambition. My obsession with English came at a cost. My schoolwork in other subjects suffered as I spent every spare moment memorizing vocabulary. My father grew increasingly angry at what he saw as a waste of time. "Enough of this foolishness!" he shouted one night when he caught me reading instead of mending the fishing nets. "Do you think words will fill your belly? Will they pay our debts?" He snatched my precious primer and threw it into the cooking fire. I watched in silent horror as the pages curled and blackened. That night, after everyone slept, I crept out to the fields and wept into the dirt. For the first time, I questioned whether my dream was just childish fantasy. Maybe Mr. D'Souza was right. What use was English to a farmer's son? But the next morning, Ram Bharose pressed something into my hand as I walked to school. It was another English book, even more tattered than my first. "For you," he mumbled before shuffling away. I never discovered where he got it, likely traded for his last bottle of liquor, but that act of kindness reignited my determination. Chapter 5. The First Breakthrough. The district scholarship exam changed everything. Every year, the top student from our region would receive admission and boarding at a prestigious English medium school in Patna. No village child had ever won. The exam was notoriously difficult, designed to favor city students with better preparation. I studied like a man possessed. While my classmates memorized answers, I focused on understanding concepts. My English reading had given me access to explanations and examples far beyond our outdated textbooks. When the results came, the headmaster refused to believe it at first. I had not only passed, but scored in the top 5% statewide. The morning I left for Patna, my entire village gathered to see me off. Even my father, who had opposed my studies so vehemently, pressed a crumpled 50-rupee note into my hand, likely borrowed at terrible interest. "Make us proud," was all he said, but in his eyes I saw something I'd never seen before. Hope. Chapter 6. Culture Shock in the City. Patna might as well have been another planet. The noise, the crowds, the sheer scale of everything overwhelmed me. At the prestigious St. Xavier's Academy, I was immediately marked as different. My village accent, my homemade clothes, my complete ignorance of city manners. The other scholarship students, all from small towns at least, banded together for protection. I found myself alone, struggling to navigate not just the academic challenges but the social ones. The dining hall became my personal nightmare. I didn't recognize half the foods, let alone know how to eat them properly. But the library was paradise. 3 floors of books, more than I'd ever imagined existing in one place. I'd sneak in after lights out, reading by the faint glow of emergency exit signs. Shakespeare, Dickens, Austen, I devoured them all, often understanding barely half the words, but enchanted by the music of the language. My English teacher, Mrs. Nair, noticed my struggles and took me under her wing. She corrected my pronunciation without mockery, explained idioms that baffled me. Why would someone kick the bucket when they die? And most importantly, gave me confidence that my background wasn't a limitation but a unique perspective. Chapter 7. The University Dream. By my final year at St. Xavier's, I was scoring top marks in English literature. The principal suggested I apply to Delhi University, an idea so audacious I nearly laughed, but Mrs. Nair wouldn't hear of my doubts. "You've come this far," she said sternly. "Now finish the journey." The entrance exam was the most difficult thing I'd ever attempted. Students from elite private schools across India competed for a handful of spots. When the acceptance letter came, I read it 20 times before believing it was real. Delhi was another level of adjustment. The sophistication of my classmates intimidated me. They discussed books I'd never heard of, bands I didn't know, politics with easy familiarity. For the first semester, I barely spoke, terrified of exposing my ignorance. But then came Professor Mehra's famous Shakespeare and Society seminar. When he asked about representations of rural life in Elizabethan drama, something in me unlocked. The insights from growing up in a village, from understanding poverty firsthand, gave me a perspective none of my city-bred classmates possessed. For the first time, my background became an asset rather than a shameful secret. Chapter 8. The Corporate World. My first job interview at a multinational corporation was a disaster. Despite my degree, my accent marked me immediately as not one of them. The HR manager's face fell when I spoke, and the interview ended in half the allotted time. The rejection stung, but I adapted. I spent months practicing neutral pronunciation, studying corporate culture, learning the unspoken rules of professional dress and behavior. When I finally landed an entry-level position at a mid-sized IT firm, I made myself indispensable, volunteering for extra work, staying late to learn new skills, transforming every weakness into strength through sheer effort. Chapter 9. Coming full circle today, as I walk through the gleaming offices of my own education startup, I still sometimes pinch myself. The boy who once practiced English by shouting into the wind now employs over 200 people across 3 countries. But my proudest achievement isn't the corporate success. It's the nonprofit schools we've built in rural areas, bringing quality English education to children like my younger self. Last month, when I visited our Bihar campus, a shy girl approached me after class. "Sir," she asked in careful English, "is it true you grew up in a village like ours?" When I nodded, her eyes widened. "Then, maybe I can do it too?" I knelt to meet her gaze. "Not maybe," I said. "Definitely. Because that's the power of English. It's not just a language, but a key that unlocks doors we don't even know exist until we hold it in our hands." My journey from that drought-stricken village to this moment wasn't about abandoning my roots, but about proving that talent exists everywhere, waiting only for opportunity to set it free. And if my story shows anything, it's that with enough determination, even the longest journey begins with a single word.